Harrison wiped the frost from his window and looked out at the ice storm raging across Seven. The wind howled like a living thing, throwing sheets of frozen crystals against the small mining station. He had seen bad weather before, but this was different. This storm could kill anything caught outside in minutes. He checked the station's systems one more time. Everything was secure. The solar panels were retracted, the emergency generator hummed quietly in the corner, and the heating units worked at full capacity. Was alone on this moon, the only human for 3 sectors. Most people would go crazy with the isolation, but he preferred it. No politics, no crowds, just him and the endless ice. The galaxy saw humans as newcomers. Other species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years before Earth built its first colony ship. Humans were unremarkable in most ways. They had no natural weapons, no special abilities, nothing that made them stand out. But they could survive almost anywhere, and they were stubborn enough to try. That was why was here, extracting rare minerals from a frozen rock at the edge of known space. He prepared for sleep, pulling off his work boots and changing into thermal clothing. The temperature outside had dropped to levels that would freeze most organic matter solid. Even the native iceworms had burrowed deep underground to wait out the storm. Was grateful for his heated quarters, small as they were. He climbed into bed and pulled his thermal blanket up to his chin. The fabric was designed to trap body heat and reflect it back, keeping him warm even if the station's heating failed. He closed his eyes and listened to the storm's fury outside. Then he felt something move under the blanket. Froze. His first thought was that one of the iceworms had somehow gotten inside, looking for warmth. But the movement was wrong, too deliberate. He slowly pulled back the blanket and found himself staring at 3 pairs of crystalline eyes. They were small, no bigger than house cats. Their bodies were covered in scales that shimmered between deep blue and silver in the dim light. Tiny wings were folded against their sides, and small horns crowned their heads. They were shivering violently, their scales barely warm to the touch. Dragon hatchlings. His breath caught in his throat. He recognized them from the species database all humans learned before traveling into deep space. These were one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. Adult were massive creatures that could breathe fire and fly through space without ships. They ruled over hundreds of worlds and rarely spoke to other species. They certainly did not let other beings touch their young. The hatchlings stared at with wide, terrified eyes. They made small clicking sounds, their bodies pressed together for warmth that was not there. Their scales should have been warm, generating their own heat as all did. But these bobbies were cold, dangerously cold. Their internal heat had failed and they were dying. Knew he should be careful. Finding hatchlings in his bed could be seen as kidnapping. The adult dragons were territorial and protective. If they thought he had stolen their young, they would destroy him and probably his entire species without a second thought. The smart thing would be to contact authorities immediately and let them handle it. But the hatchlings were dying right now. Their home must have been destroyed by the storm. They had crawled into his station seeking any source of warmth, and his heated bed was the only thing keeping them alive. Looked at the tiny creatures shivering in his blanket and made his choice. He smiled gently and carefully gathered the hatchlings closer. They tried to resist at first, their instincts telling them to fear the strange alien, but moved slowly, his hands warm and steady. He wrapped them in the thermal blanket and pulled them against his chest, sharing his body heat. The hatchlings went still, uncertain, kept his movements gentle and his breathing calm. He did not know if they could understand human sounds, but he spoke softly anyway. His voice was low and soothing, the kind of tone someone might use with a frightened child. Slowly, the hatchlings stopped fighting. The warmth was undeniable, and something in his tone made them feel safe. They pressed against his chest, their small claws gripping his shirt. Their scales began to warm, drawing heat from his body. The shivering gradually stopped. Felt their tiny hearts beating rapidly against him. One of them, slightly larger than the others with deeper blue scales, made a small chirping sound. It was not aggressive or afraid. It sounded almost content. The other too the sound and felt something tight in his chest loosen. He adjusted the blanket to cover all of them, making sure each hatchling had contact with his warm skin. They weighed almost nothing, and their scales were surprisingly smooth. For creatures that were supposed to be the galaxy's most fearsome predators, they looked fragile and innocent. Closed his eyes but did not sleep immediately. He kept one arm around the hatchlings, making sure they stayed warm. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the moon. Inside, 3 dragon bobbies slept peacefully against a human's chest, safe for the first time in hours. Did not know that hatchlings imprinted on the first being who showed them true kindness. He did not know that these 3 were not just any dragons, but children of the queen herself. He did not know that their disappearance had triggered a galactic emergency, with the entire dragon fleet searching every corner of known space. All knew was that 3 small creatures needed help, and he had the power to give it. That was enough. As sleep finally took him, his last thought was simple. Tomorrow he would figure out how to return them safely. Tonight, he would just keep them warm. It was the kind of decision that seemed small in the moment, the kind that most people would make without thinking twice. But sometimes the smallest decisions change everything. Sometimes a simple act of kindness, one person choosing to help instead of turning away, can reshape the future of entire civilizations. Would learn that truth soon enough. For now, he slept with 3 dragon bobbies curled against him, their soft breathing matching his own. The storm raged outside, but inside there was only warmth and the quiet peace of beings who had found safety in the most unexpected place, woke to the feeling of small claws kneading against his chest. He opened his eyes and found 3 dragon hatchlings staring at him from inches away. Their crystalline eyes sparkled with curiosity, and they were making soft chirping sounds. More importantly, they were warm. Their scales radiated gentle heat, and they looked healthy and alert. He sat up carefully and the hatchlings tumbled into his lap. They did not seem afraid anymore. The largest one, the female with deep blue scales, climbed up his arm and perched on his shoulder. She touched her snout to his cheek and felt a flutter of something in his mind. Not words exactly, but emotions. Gratitude, trust, affection. Smiled and gently lifted her back down. He needed to figure out what to do next. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the ice moon quiet and clear. He could see mountains of frozen crystal stretching to the horizon through his window. He set the hatchlings on his bed and went to check the station's sensors. The screen showed a massive cave system about 5 kilometers from his location. According to the data, it had collapsed during the storm. That must have been their nest. The hatchlings had somehow made it to his station, probably following the heat signature. Tried to contact any nearby vessels using the standard emergency channels. The communicator crackled with static, but no one responded. That was strange. This sector usually had plenty of traffic. Someone should have answered. Behind him, the hatchlings made urgent chirping sounds. Turned to find them pawing at his food storage unit. They were hungry. Of course they were. Growing creatures needed to eat, and they had probably not had a meal since before the storm. Opened the storage unit and started pulling out different items. He offered them standard rations, but the hatchlings sniffed them and turned away. He tried dried fruit. No interest. Then he pulled out the emergency protein packs, the ones designed for extreme survival situations. All 3 hatchlings perked up immediately. They crowded around the packet, trying to tear it open with their small claws and teeth. But the packaging was too tough for them, designed to survive anything. They made frustrated sounds and looked at with pleading eyes. Could not help but laugh. He tore open the packet and broke off small pieces. The hatchlings ate eagerly, making happy chirping sounds between bites. Fed them by hand, making sure each one got equal portions. They were surprisingly polite for creatures with such fearsome reputations. They waited their turn and did not fight over the food. When they finished eating, the hatchlings seemed full of energy. They followed as he moved around the station, their claws clicking on the metal floor. When he sat down to repair a damaged solar panel, they climbed onto the workbench and watched intently. Their eyes tracked his every movement as he soldered connections and tested circuits. The smallest hatchling, a male with lighter silver scales, reached out and touched a spare wire, gently moved it away from the electrical components. The hatchling chirped and tried again, realized he was curious, trying to learn. So showed him, letting him hold the safe wire while explaining what it did. The hatchling probably did not understand the words, but he seemed to appreciate being included. Decided to exercise next. He needed to maintain his strength in the low gravity. He started doing push-ups on the floor. The hatchlings watched for a moment, then tried to copy him. They pressed their front legs down and pushed, their back legs sticking up awkwardly. They collapsed in a pile, chirping in confusion. Laughed so hard he had to stop exercising. The hatchlings looked offended for a moment, then seemed to realize how silly they looked. They made sounds that resembled laughter, a trilling chirp that filled the small station with warmth. It was the first time had laughed in months. Being alone in space was quiet and peaceful, but it was also lonely. He had not realized how much he missed simple companionship until these three small beings tumbled into his life. His communicator beeped with an incoming message, activated it, and heard a galaxy-wide broadcast. The voice was calm but firm, translated into all major languages including human English. Attention all vessels and stations. The Empire has declared a state of emergency. 3 royal hatchlings have disappeared from an expedition to study ice worlds in this sector. All ships and facilities will be searched. Anyone found harboring the royal children will face the full military might of the fleet. Anyone with information should contact imperial authorities immediately. The message, repeated in other languages, felt his stomach drop. Royal hatchlings. These were not just any dragon bobbies. They were the children of the queen herself, and they were currently playing with his tools on his workbench, completely content and showing no sign of wanting to leave. The broadcast continued, providing descriptions of the hatchlings. 3 juveniles, 1 female and 2 males, scales in shades of blue and silver. Last seen in the northern ice fields of 7 before the storm hit. They assumed the worst. They thought someone had stolen their future rulers. Looked at the hatchlings. They looked back at him with complete trust. The female chirped and held up a small bolt she had found, proud of her discovery. She wanted to show him what she had learned. Could contact the fleet right now. He could end this before it became dangerous. The smart thing would be to return the hatchlings immediately and explain everything. They would understand once they heard the truth, probably. But something stopped him. These bobbies had been terrified and freezing. They had crawled into his bed seeking help, and he had given it. Now they trusted him. They followed him everywhere, watched him work, tried to copy his movements. For creatures that were supposedly being held captive, they seemed remarkably happy. Made a decision. He would wait. Not long, just enough time to make sure the hatchlings were truly healthy and safe. He would observe them, let them guide him. If they wanted to leave, he would help them return home immediately. But if they were content, if they felt safe here, then maybe rushing to contact the fleet was not the right choice. That night, as prepared for sleep, the hatchlings surprised him again. They had made a nest out of his spare blankets in the corner, a cozy pile that should have been perfect for them. But when climbed into bed, all 3 abandoned their nest and climbed in with him. The largest hatchling, the female, climbed onto his chest. She looked into his eyes for a long moment, then pressed her small snout against his forehead, gasped as images flooded his mind. He saw through her eyes, he felt what she felt. The terror of the storm, the cold seeping into her bones, the desperate search for warmth. Then his door opening, the blessed heat of his quarters, the soft blanket. His face looking down at her with concern, not anger. His smile. His gentle hands, safety. The hatchling was showing him her memories, sharing them. This was how bonded, realized. They opened their minds to those they trusted completely. She was claiming him as family, as the one who saved her when death was certain. Felt tears in his eyes. He had not expected this. He had only done what anyone would do. He had helped someone in need. But to this little dragon, it meant everything. He wrapped his arms around all three hatchlings and held them close. Tomorrow would bring difficult choices. The fleet was coming and would have to face the consequences of his kindness. But tonight, he had three dragon bobbies who trusted him completely. And somehow, that made everything worth it. The warship appeared in orbit 3 days later. Saw it through his window, a massive vessel that looked like a dragon carved from black metal and fire. Smaller ships surrounded it, dozens of them, spreading out to cover every approach to 7. Stood at the window with the three hatchlings pressed against his legs. They could sense something was happening. The female, who had started thinking of as Lyra, made worried chirping sounds. Her brothers huddled closer to his warmth. His communicator crackled to life. The voice was deep and commanding, speaking in accented but clear English. All inhabitants of 7 will present themselves for inspection. Any resistance will be met with appropriate force. You have 1 hour to comply. Looked down at the three hatchlings. They stared back with trusting eyes. He had known this moment would come. They would search every structure on this moon. There was no hiding 3 royal children and had no intention of trying. He gathered supplies into a bag. Food the hatchlings liked, a few tools they enjoyed playing with, and his warmest blanket. He recorded a message explaining everything and sent it to the central communications hub. If something happened to him, at least someone would know the truth. Then wrapped the hatchlings in the blanket and picked them up carefully. They made questioning sounds but did not resist. They trusted him completely, and that trust felt heavier than their small bodies. Walked out of his station into the frozen landscape. They had landed several ships near his location. Warriors in battle armor surrounded the area, massive beings twice the height of any human. Their scales gleamed like weapons, and their eyes glowed with barely contained fire. The warriors raised their weapons when they saw. He kept walking, his steps slow and measured. He held the bundle of sleeping hatchlings against his chest, making no threatening moves. A warrior approached, larger than the others. His armor was marked with symbols did not recognize, probably rank insignia. His eyes fixed on the bundle in his arms, and his entire body went rigid. "You human, what are you carrying?" Stopped walking but did not lower his arms. The hatchlings were waking up now, disturbed by the unfamiliar sounds and smells. Lyra poked her head out of the blanket and looked around. "My name is Harrison. I am carrying 3 dragon hatchlings who came into my quarters during the ice storm 3 nights ago. They were freezing and near death. I gave them warmth and food. I was waiting for them to be healthy enough to travel before contacting your fleet." The warrior's eyes blazed brighter. He took a step forward, his claws extending. In culture, touching royal offspring without permission was among the worst crimes imaginable. Seeing a human, a species barely capable of space travel, cradling the queen's children seemed like the ultimate insult. "You dare touch royal blood. You dare claim to protect them. You will die for this offense, human." Before the warrior could strike, Lyra made a distressed sound. She burrowed deeper into his arms, pressing against his chest. Her brothers woke fully and did the same, all 3 hatchlings clinging to with obvious fear. The warrior stopped. His expression shifted from rage to confusion. Stolen children should be trying to escape their captor. They should be reaching for their own kind, desperate to return home. But these hatchlings were doing the opposite. They were seeking protection from the human. "Commander," another warrior said quietly, "this is not what we expected." Commander stared at and the hatchlings. He activated his communicator and spoke in the language, too rapid for his basic translator to follow. Then he looked back at. "You will come with us. The queen will decide your fate. If you resist, we will take you by force." Nodded, he had expected nothing less. "I will not resist, but please do not frighten them. They have been through enough already." Several warriors made sounds of disbelief. A human was telling them not to frighten hatchlings. The audacity would have been funny if the situation was not so serious. They escorted to a transport ship. The interior was designed for beings much larger than humans. Sat on a bench that left his feet dangling above the floor, still holding the hatchlings. Warriors surrounded him, their weapons ready but not aimed directly at him. Lyra chirped softly and nuzzled against neck. Her brothers made similar sounds, content despite the presence of dozens of their own species. The warriors watched with expressions could not read. Confusion, certainly. Maybe something like wonder. The transport lifted off and docked with the massive warship in orbit, was led through corridors filled with crew members. All of them stopped to stare. Word had spread quickly. The human who held the royal children was being brought before the queen. They entered a throne room that took breath away. The ceiling soared hundreds of feet above, decorated with crystals that caught and reflected light like captured stars. Columns of carved stone lined the walls, each one telling stories of ancient battles and victories. At the far end of the room, on a throne of black stone and gold, sat Queen. She was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Her scales gleamed like molten gold, and her eyes burned with intelligence and power. She was easily 3 times the size of her warriors, her wings folded against her back like cloaks of fire. When she saw carrying her children, her eyes blazed brighter. Forced himself to keep walking. His heart pounded so hard he was sure everyone could hear it, but he kept his hands steady on the hatchlings. He would not show fear in front of them, no matter how terrified he felt. He reached the base of the throne and stopped. The room was filled with nobles and warriors, all watching to see what would happen, looked up at the queen and waited. Queen rose from her throne. Her voice filled the chamber like thunder. "You stand accused of the highest crimes known to our people. You have touched royal offspring without permission. You have kept them from their family. You have created a bond that should belong only to caretakers. Each of these crimes carries a sentence of death. What defense do you offer, human?" Swallowed hard. He could try to explain, but words felt inadequate. Instead, he did something that made the entire room gasp. He knelt and gently set the hatchlings on the floor, giving them complete freedom to choose. He looked at Lyra and her brothers, his eyes gentle despite his fear. "You are safe now. You can return to your mother, to your people, to the life you were meant to have. I will not hold you. I never wanted to keep you from your family. I only wanted to help." The throne room fell absolutely silent. This was not how captors behaved. This was not how someone who wanted power or ransom acted, had given the hatchlings their freedom, expecting nothing in return. The 3 hatchlings looked at their mother. They chirped in recognition, their instincts telling them this magnificent being had given them life. But they did not run to her. Instead, they turned back too. Lyra climbed into his lap and curled up. Her brothers followed immediately, pressing against him. They had made their choice, and it shook the throne room like an earthquake. Queen stared at her children clinging to a human, a being she could crush without effort. Her roar shook the walls and made crystals rain from the ceiling. Warriors stepped back and nobles cowered, but stayed where he was, kneeling on the floor with 3 dragon bobbies in his arms. He looked up at the queen with steady eyes, waiting for judgment. "How dare you?" Queen's voice could have melted stone. "How dare a human, barely capable of surviving in the void, steal the affection of my children?" But even as she spoke, something in her expression shifted. She looked closer at. She saw the scratches on his hands where small claws had gripped too tight. She saw the exhaustion in his face, the worry in his eyes. She saw something she had not expected to see in an alien. She saw love. "You will open your mind to me, human. I will see the truth of what happened. If you have harmed my children, if you have manipulated them in any way, you will beg for death before I am done with you." Nodded slowly. He did not know how this mind link worked, but he had nothing to hide. "I agree. See everything. I have told you only the truth." Queen descended from her throne and approached. She was so large that felt like an insect before her. She placed one massive claw on his forehead, gentle despite its obvious power. Then she entered his mind, and his world dissolved into memory. Queen saw everything through memories. She watched the storm rage across the frozen moon. She felt his exhaustion as he prepared for sleep, his shock when he found 3 freezing hatchlings in his bed. She experienced his moment of decision, when he could have chosen safety but instead chose to help. She saw him wrap her children in his blanket, sharing his warmth without hesitation. She felt his worry as he monitored their breathing through the night. She watched him try to feed them, laughing when they made a mess, patient when they struggled with the packaging. She saw him play with them, teach them, protect them. Most importantly, she felt what he felt. There was no greed in his heart, no desire for power or recognition. He had helped 3 dying children because it was the right thing to do. He expected nothing in return. He would have been content to return them quietly and go back to his lonely life on the ice. The queen from his mind. She stood before him, her expression unreadable. The throne room waited in tense silence. Nobles whispered to each other, trying to guess what she had seen. Knelt on the floor, still holding the hatchlings. His head ached from the mental connection, but he kept his focus on the queen. Whatever she decided, he would accept it. He had done what he believed was right. Queen spoke, her voice quieter now but no less powerful. "I have seen the truth. This human did not steal my children. He saved them from certain death. He gave them warmth, food, and care. He asked for nothing in return." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some nobles looked relieved. Others seemed disappointed, perhaps hoping for a more dramatic resolution. The queen continued, "In our culture, strength is everything. We value power, conquest, the ability to dominate others. But this human showed a different kind of strength. He risked his life for beings that meant nothing to his species. He expected no reward, no recognition. He simply saw creatures in need and helped them." She looked directly at, her burning eyes meeting his. "You will not die, Harrison. Instead, you will be honored as a friend of the Empire. Your action has shown us something we had forgotten in our pursuit of power. Compassion is not weakness. Kindness is not surrender. These qualities require a strength we have lost." The throne room erupted in shocked conversation. A human was being honored by the Dragon Queen. It was unprecedented. But Queen raised one claw for silence. "However, there is a complication. My children have bonded with you too deeply to separate them now. They need time to transfer their attachment back to their own kind. Until that happens, you must come to our and help raise them. You will teach them what you taught them in your small station. You will show them how to be compassionate while remaining strong." Felt the weight of those words. Leave his quiet life on 7. Live among dragons on there. It should have been terrifying, but when he looked down at Lyra and her brothers, he knew his answer. "I accept. I will help them however I can." Some nobles objected immediately. A warrior named Lord stepped forward, his scales dark red with anger. "Your Majesty, this is madness. We cannot allow a human to live in the royal palace. We cannot let an alien teach our future rulers. It dishonors everything we are." Other nobles murmured agreement. The queen had the power to make this decision, but it was clear many of her people were not happy about it. Queen looked at Lord with cold eyes. "Do you question my judgment?" Lord bowed his head slightly, but his voice remained firm. "I question whether this human truly has anything to teach us. One act of kindness does not prove worth. Let him be tested. If he can prove that humans deserve our respect, then I will accept your decision. But if he fails, he must leave and never contact the royal children again." The queen considered this, could see her weighing options. She needed to maintain her authority, but she also needed her people to accept this decision. A test would give them that. Very well. Harrison will face 3 challenges. If he succeeds, his place in the royal palace will be secure. If he fails, he will return to his people. But know this, Lord, if these challenges are designed to cause harm rather than test worth, you will face my displeasure. Lord bowed deeper. The challenges will be fair, my queen. I seek only to prove what is true. Felt Lyra grip his shirt. She sensed danger but gently stroked her scales to calm her. He looked up at the queen and nodded. I accept these challenges. The journey to the took 2 days. Was given quarters on the royal ship, rooms designed for beings much larger than him. The hatchling stayed with him constantly, sleeping in a nest of blankets he made for them. Crew members would stop and stare through his open door, amazed to see the royal children so comfortable with an alien. It was breathtaking. Massive floating cities hung in the sky, held aloft by technology could not begin to understand. Crystal towers rose from mountain peaks, catching the light of 3 suns. Ancient strongholds carved into cliffs showed the age of civilization. Was given chambers in the royal palace itself, an honor never granted to an alien. The rooms were huge, with ceilings that soared overhead and windows that offered views of the entire capital. The hatchlings loved it, flying short distances and exploring every corner. But not everyone was happy about its presence. As he walked through the palace halls, some would stop and glare. Others made comments in their language that translator could not process but whose tone was clear. He was an outsider, a reminder that their queen had chosen to honor an alien over her own people. The first challenge came a week after their arrival. Was summoned to a training arena, a massive circular space with seats for thousands of spectators. The stands were full. It seemed the entire capital wanted to watch. Lord stood in the center of the arena. Beside him was a young warrior, scales gleaming red and black, muscles rippling under armor. Your first challenge is strength, Lord announced. In our culture, might makes right. You will face this warrior in combat. If you can prove yourself worthy, you pass. If you fall, you fail. Looked at his opponent. The warrior was twice his height and probably 10 times his weight. This was not a fight he could win through force, but maybe that was not the point. The match began. The young warrior charged immediately, confident in his superior size and strength. Dodged, using his smaller size to his advantage. The warrior's claws swept through empty air where had been standing. Did not try to hurt his opponent. Instead, he focused on teaching. He used leverage to redirect attacks. He demonstrated how to use an opponent's momentum against them. He showed tactical thinking, turning disadvantages into advantages. The crowd watched in growing fascination. This human was not fighting to win. He was fighting to demonstrate principles. When the warrior finally cornered him and could not escape, he tapped the ground in surrender. But something remarkable had happened. The young warrior was breathing hard, impressed despite himself. Lord's expression was unreadable. The human loses the combat, announced. But the challenge was to prove worth through strength. The question now is whether intelligence and strategy count as strength, or if only raw power matters. Queen rose from her seat. Strategy and intelligence are strength. Any fool can swing a fist. It takes wisdom to know when to fight and how to win. The human passes the first challenge. The crowd murmured, but no one dared contradict the queen. The second challenge came 3 days later. Had to survive in the harsh mountains surrounding the capital for 3 days without supplies. They expected him to fail quickly. Their world was harsher than Earth, with thinner atmosphere and extreme temperature shifts. But used everything he had learned on 7. He found shelter in caves. He created fire using crystals that focused sunlight. He discovered which plants were safe to eat by watching native animals. When he returned after 3 days, exhausted but alive, even Lord looked impressed. The third challenge was announced that night. Stood before the royal court, dirty from his mountain survival but standing straight. Your final challenge is wisdom, Lord said. We have a problem that has plagued our empire for generations. The species has been stealing resources from our border worlds. We want to crush them militarily, as is our way. But you must provide a solution that does not make us look weak. If you can solve what our greatest minds could not, you pass. If you fail, you leave this world forever. Looked at the assembled nobles. He saw the trap immediately. Any solution he proposed would be picked apart, but he had to try for the hatchlings who watched from beside the queen's throne. He took a breath and spoke. Why are they stealing from you? Lord frowned. Because they are thieves and cowards. Shook his head. No species risks war out of simple greed. There must be a reason. Have you investigated? The nobles looked at each other. Investigation implied talking to enemies, trying to understand them. That was not the way. Continued, I suggest you invite them to negotiate, not as enemies but as potential partners. Find out what they need. If their worlds are dying, share your terraforming technology. If they need resources, establish trade. Turn them from thieves into allies. The throne room exploded in argument. Half the nobles thought suggestion was brilliant. The other half thought it was naive foolishness. But Queen was smiling. That is the answer I hope to hear. Strength is not just the ability to destroy enemies. It is the wisdom to turn them into friends. Harrison has passed all 3 challenges. Lord stepped forward. He looked at for a long moment, then bowed his head. I acknowledge that I was wrong. This human has proven his worth. Felt relief flood through him. He had done it. He could stay with the hatchlings, help them grow, teach them everything he knew. And maybe, just maybe, he could help them remember that true strength came in many forms. The months that followed changed everything. Lived in the royal palace, his chambers always filled with the sounds of growing dragon hatchlings. Lyra and her brothers were getting bigger, their wings stronger, their scales brighter. But they still sought company above all others. Every morning would wake to find 3 dragons draped across his bed. They were too large now to all fit comfortably, but they tried anyway. Lyra would rest her head on his chest, her brothers curled on either side. When got up, they would follow him through the palace, their claws clicking on marble floors. The other young began to notice. They would watch from doorways as played with the royal children. They saw how he encouraged them without demanding dominance, how he praised their successes and helped them learn from failures, how he taught them to think before acting, to consider others before themselves. Some young dragons started approaching with questions. At first, just a few, then more. Soon found himself teaching classes, showing dragon children how to solve problems through creativity instead of force. The palace tutors were amazed at how engaged their students became. Taught them about cooperation. He showed them games where everyone won or everyone lost together. He introduced them to human stories about heroes who chose mercy over revenge, understanding over hate. The young dragons absorbed these lessons like water in desert sand. But not everyone was happy with the changes. Some older nobles grumbled that was making the young generation soft. They worried that teaching compassion would weaken the empire. Lord, despite his public acceptance, watched with wary eyes. One day was teaching a group of young dragons about problem solving when an alarm sounded through the palace. The delegation had arrived. Queen had taken advice and invited them to negotiate. Now it was time to see if his solution would work. Watched from the throne room as they entered. They were smaller than, their bodies covered in sleek fur instead of scales. They moved nervously, clearly expecting a trap. Centuries of conflict had taught them not to trust dragons. The negotiation began. Queen offered technology in exchange for loyalty and resources. The leader, a female named Elder Myra, listened carefully. Then she explained their situation. Their worlds were dying from environmental collapse. They had stolen from the out of desperation, not greed. Their people were starving. Watch the nobles. Some looked disgusted that enemies would dare plead poverty. Others seemed moved by the story. Queen remained expressionless but saw her claws grip the throne arms. Elder Myra finished her explanation and waited for judgment. The throne room was silent. Then Lyra did something unexpected. She flew from her perch beside her mother's throne and landed in front of the delegation. The guards moved to intervene, but Queen held up one claw. Everyone watched as Lyra approached Elder Myra. The young dragon princess looked at the frightened leader and made a soft chirping sound. It was the same sound she made when was sad, a gesture of comfort and understanding. Elder Myra stared at the dragon princess in shock. Then tears filled her eyes. A royal showing compassion to an enemy. It was something she never expected to see. Lyra turned to her mother and spoke in the language. His translator caught the words. "She is afraid, mother, like I was afraid in the storm. Helped me when I was scared and cold. Can we help them?" The throne room erupted in whispers. The young princess had just compared her own suffering to that of an enemy species. She had suggested showing mercy based on shared experience. It was revolutionary. Queen looked at her daughter, then he saw the question in her eyes. This was his influence, his teaching. Was this what she wanted for her people? Met her gaze steadily. He believed in what he had taught. Compassion was not weakness. Understanding was not surrender. The strong could afford to be kind. Queen rose from her throne. We will provide terraforming technology, medical supplies, and food until their worlds are stable. In return, you will become allies of the Empire. Together, we will be stronger than either species alone. Elder Myra dropped to her knees, overcome with relief. The delegation wept openly. They had expected war or death, not salvation. The nobles were stunned, but none dared question their queen's decision. Lord approached after the delegation left. The older warrior looked at him with new respect. "You have changed us, human. In a few short months, you have taught our young to think differently. You have shown us that strength comes in forms we never considered. I was wrong to doubt you." Shook his head. "I only showed you what was already there. They are capable of great compassion. You just forgot it in your pursuit of power." Over the following months, the alliance with the flourished. The provided aid, and the responded with loyalty and gratitude. Other species watched in amazement. The fearsome dragon empire was changing before their eyes, becoming diplomatic where once they were only aggressive. Continued teaching the royal children. Lyra grew into a thoughtful and kind princess. Her brothers followed her example, becoming voices for understanding in the royal court. Queen watched her children with pride, knowing they would be better rulers than she had been. One evening, sat in his chambers watching the three suns set over the crystal city. Lyra landed beside him, now large enough that her wing brushed the ceiling. Her brothers joined her, barely fitting in the room anymore. "You are thinking of home," Lyra said. Had taught her English and she spoke it well now. "You miss your ice moon." Smiled sometimes, "But I am happy here. I have watched you grow into amazing beings. That is worth more than any quiet life." "You taught us well," one of the brothers said, "but we do not need you to hold our claws anymore. We are strong enough to walk our own path now." Felt tears in his eyes. He had known this moment would come. The hatchlings were nearly adults now. They had reconnected with their culture, their family, their responsibilities. They did not need a human guardian anymore. The next day, met with Queen in her private chambers. She looked at him with warmth that would have seemed impossible months ago. "You have given my children a gift beyond measure," she said. "You taught them that power without compassion is tyranny, that strength without wisdom is destruction. You have changed the future of my empire." Bowed respectfully. "I only helped them see what was already in their hearts. They would have found this path eventually." "Perhaps, but you accelerated that journey by years, maybe generations. For that, humanity will always have the friendship of the Empire. You may stay as long as you wish. These chambers are yours forever." Thought about it. The palace was beautiful and he loved the dragons he had come to know. But he missed the quiet of his ice moon. He missed the simple life of mining and solitude. He had changed the galaxy, but now he was ready to go home. "I would like to return to 7, he said, "if that is acceptable." Queen nodded. "Of course. But know that you are always welcome here. My children will want to visit you, and we will establish a permanent presence on your moon. Young dragons will come to learn from you, to understand what you taught my children." Returned to 7 on a transport. His small mining station looked exactly as he had left it, but everything else had changed. Within a week, they built an embassy nearby. Dragons came and went, visiting to learn about human culture and philosophy. News of Story spread across the galaxy. Humans were no longer seen as unremarkable newcomers. Other species began to recognize them for unique strengths, not in weapons or technology, but in their capacity for compassion, creativity, and bridge building between different cultures. Embassies from dozens of species appeared in human space. They came to learn, to establish relationships, to understand this species that had changed the empire through simple kindness. Humanity's role in the galaxy shifted from observers to mediators, from nobodies to essential voices for peace. Continued his quiet life, mining rare minerals and watching the ice storms. But he was never alone anymore. Young dragons visited regularly, staying in the embassy and coming to his station for lessons. They would crowd into his small quarters, scales scraping walls, wings folded tight, all trying to fit in the space where 3 hatchlings once huddled for warmth. Every few months, Lyra would visit with her brothers. They were magnificent now, their scales gleaming, their wings powerful enough to cross star systems. But when they entered station, they became the small hatchlings again, chirping for attention and curling up beside him. One night, as sat in his quarters reading messages from friends across the stars, he heard familiar sounds outside. He looked up to see 3 massive dragons landing, their forms barely visible in the darkness. They had to fold their wings tight to fit through his door. Lyra entered first, her scales shimmering in the station's lights. "We brought you something," she said. Her brothers carried a package wrapped in fine cloth. Inside was a sculpture made of crystal and gold, depicting 3 small hatchlings huddled against a human figure. Below it, words were carved in both and English. To Harrison, who smiled when he could have turned away, who shared warmth when he could have chosen safety, who taught us that the strongest hearts are those willing to help others, friend of the bridge between species, protector of those in need. Felt tears on his cheeks. He had only done what anyone should do. He had helped 3 freezing children. He had expected nothing in return, but that simple choice had changed everything. The 3 dragons crowded around him, barely fitting in the small station. They rested their great heads against him, just like that first night, and smiled, knowing that the smallest acts of kindness could reshape the entire galaxy. Outside, the ice moon sparkled under distant stars. Inside, a human and 3 dragons sat together in comfortable silence, connected by a bond that would never break. The galaxy was different now, better, because one person chose to help instead of turn away. And it all began with 3 dragon bobbies seeking warmth in a stranger's blanket, and a human who smiled and cradled them gently.